remind me. Okay, go ahead.
I think it's a tradition for every meeting, right? Okay. Hello, it's November 9th or 10th. It's a SIG Node meeting. PR status. So today we have we have 2 weeks statistics, not 1 week, because last week was skipped, and 59 PRs were created and 46 were merged. So it's a pretty good number, given in mind that like some of them were closed. So we again above like closing and merging more PRs than creating, which is a good trend. Let's keep it up. And I really want to emphasize that we have 29 LGTM'd PRs, some of them LGTM for a long time, and we really need to have somebody to take a look and start approving those PRs. We also have some PRs in test area. We discussed it on CI group yesterday and the week before. That doesn't have enough attention. So whoever interested in reviewing test PRs, which is very important for reliability of Kubernetes, please take it a shot, and I can paste a specific URL if you want, but it's pretty hard, easy to find.
So on the pending approval that have LGTM, I had spent a fair amount of time yesterday going through like a bit of the backlog and trying to find everything that I could approve. A number of, I don't know if you have stats, Sergey, for things that required approval in parts of the KK tree that are not just to the SIG, but I think that list should be much smaller. I don't know if you have a way of tracking that.
I also went through some of the already looks good to me PR, but there's something like, for example, runtime class. It looks good to me, but there's actually still have a question raised by reviewer, but it's not answered. So that's why I'm also didn't feel comfortable just approval. Like also Sergey, you brought some topic here today, right? So this is why we cannot just look at the PIs looks good to me and then just approval. So a lot of time I look at that. Some is really trivial and just immediately can be approved, and some actually it is still have question and answered by the original author, but there's the looks good to me applied. So that's the kind of status. I also look at that next Monday. So yeah, I think about if the original author can, if there's the answer and also achieve the agreement, and please write down and the comment and summarize the decision, and it's much easier for fellow approver and to give approval. And even like some open question, at least make a point there. So this is the open question, but we decided a point. And so that's kind of much easier to reasonable. Otherwise, the fellow approver basically have to read the whole code to understand why this is not unaddressed.
Yeah, it makes sense. Maybe you and Derek, you can drop a comment saying it doesn't seem relevant, or like it still have open questions. So it may happen that some people believe that all questions are answered, but in reality it's not clear from a PR status.
That's true.
Yeah, mostly, Sergey, my comment was the query we're tracking here is everything that was labeled with SIG Node, but not exclusively just labeled with SIG Node. And so a number of these things have API changes that were being held up or spanned a couple other SIGs. And so I think from my perspective, I thought we were in the takeaway here for me is I feel like we're getting in a cleaner, better spot. And hopefully that those on the call can feel that way as well. And so, yeah, anyway, that was my only thought.
Yeah, I'll think how to track that. I see what you, like cherry picks, for instance, they are OGTM'd for a while, but they're stuck on the release managers, for instance. That kind of situations, right?
Yeah, or just anything that has API changes, usually blocked by API.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Several have the API change, yeah. And also something like it is true for Sergey mentioned, some is stuck with the release manager, like if the patch release, So but that one, I don't concern about. We don't give approval. We give approval anyway. If the fellow code, it is release manager, so it's not the concern. My most concern it is some is require about like the not answer question, like the unaddressed question, no last decision, a comment made there. Another thing it is like a shared duty, like for example, API, and some it is like the shared with the security, the auth, sig auth. So that's kind of like the I don't want like the we are paper over the problem and just approval. Then the things get merged, but actually the some corresponding team didn't look into and didn't agree. So that's the problem here. Yeah, but I agree with Derek. Overall, I think we are getting better and better.
Yeah, and maybe before we dive into the other topics here, I was trying to focus on what we wanted to close out in 120 this week, given that there's code freeze. I want to thank Kevin for taking a pass at the memory manager PR, which I know folks in the community were looking for, and hopefully we can unblock that. I think I got all of Tim Auclair's stuff unblocked. I know, Renal, you have an item here on CRI, but if folks can, I'll put a section in the docs or on the agenda here. If folks can just link to PRs that we might be missing that we wanted to land this week, I think that would be helpful for ensuring we can get priority focus. Otherwise, I'm just going by what Kubernetes shows me. I know I had a couple around huge page downward API stuff that Jordan is reviewing. So I just want to make sure everybody who put work in this release is able to have a best shot at getting it merged.
So one PR to call out, Derek, is that the PR to support exec plugins for fetching registry credentials. I think it's close to merging. Jordan has been reviewing it. He thinks the API is in a good spot, but I do think either you or Don should review the, the kubelet level changes for that one.
Sure. So Andrew, can you put that PR link to the, so we can basically look at that all together. Yeah, so thanks in the agenda. And also Sergey put his runtime class there. Yeah.
Yeah, and Andrew, while you're here, I guess we had the discussion on the credential provider plugins in the past. I know that spans kubelet, a number of other areas. Is that something you're trying to land today? I see Jordan's still active on it, but
yeah, so we are trying to land it for 120. It will be alpha and off by default. But yeah, I think we are trying to get it in for 120.
Okay. And then the other question, I don't know if anyone from SIG Windows is here, is there's a change open right now for Windows support to update container resources, which I thought also touched CRI. I didn't know if Mernal had looked at that at all. Yeah, maybe we can use this as a time to call out
okay.
a thank you to Mernal for stepping up to help approve ours here.
I'm here from Windows. I think that's a forward-looking change that we need in the CRI to be able to resize, container or pods and everything. So that was just CRI changes. That there's no implementation behind it at this point in Kubernetes. But there will be work being done in Container D to use those changes after the CRI changes go in.
Yeah, I guess what I was trying to figure out is, given Mernal's trying to get CRI to beta in this release, were these changes forward compatible? Or maybe Mernal, if you can just take a look, that'd be good.
Yeah, if you have a link to the PR somewhere, I can take a look.
Okay.
I can drop it in the Slack chat here in just a second. It's just adding 2 fields to one to the update container request. I think
Okay.
So it should be forward compatible. Yeah, I'm dropping it in the chat right now.
Okay. Thanks.
And then maybe, Dims, we should figure out, I wanted to make sure the CRI beta transition happened before we deprecate your do your PR. So maybe we can just make sure we cover
Yes,
that as we get through Mrinal's section.
Sounds good. I'm also trying to mark a milestone for the PRs that are showing up here in this doc section. So that'll help too.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, then if we're good on that, maybe we can go through the agenda items. So the first item I had thrown on here last week, we've had a lot of discussion internally here at Red Hat about various use cases that might potentially benefit from Kubernetes having more intelligent usage around swap, and that caused me to look back at the issue, which is kind of reinforcing that there were a number of participants in the community who seemed surprised when Kube does not recommend supporting swap. And so what I was curious about is if there are a group of folks that wanted to potentially get together and kind of put together a cap on how we could handle this. And maybe we could get like a small group and a head start on this for 121. So some of the workloads that we were debating around this was things like the KubeVirt project as an example, and then some databases. So I'm kind of curious if there's anyone on the call that maybe represents communities that might be beneficial from better supporting for swap.
Well, I am interested in this topic, specifically in like not a conventional swap, but more in terms of Z-swap implementation. And second part, there is also with different types of memory, like on the same system, when you have a fast and slower memory, it also have the same scenarios like with a swap and with promises to the pods on what kind of memory and how much it should be using. So yeah, topic is interesting.
So maybe what I'll do is if there's interest, I could start a Google Doc together that we could kind of capture individual use cases. One of the things I know Mrinal and I were debating was if swap should actually be a schedulable resource or some fixed amount of overhead that's available on the node. But maybe in general, the ask here will be if I throw this doc here, if folks are actually interested in closing on this, we can get use cases settled in advance of 121.
Yeah, I'm here, Dave Gilbert, from the QEMU side of things, and you know, I raised this with Derek, and one of the reasons is from QEMU we've got a very loose definition of how much RAM that we'll use, and while previously people have tried to get heuristics of the amount of RAM we'll need, everybody has previously run away and given up and added some swap. And certainly on OpenStack, we assume that people have swap for running QEMU guests. So it kind of came as a bit of a surprise to us that we didn't have any available on Kubernetes.
Yeah, so that's coming from the use cases around the KubeVirt project, but I know that's just one of many projects that seem to desire some amount of swap. So maybe then as a next step here, it sounds like there's reasonable interest. I'll throw a doc together and paste it in here. And if we can get use cases settled on, that will help inform a proper cut. But I guess that's, if there's no other comments on that, then maybe David, we can go to your next PR.
Sure. Hey everyone. So this is just a follow-up from the discussion last week about pod level metrics in the resource metrics endpoint. And specifically, this is just a question about naming. We have two competing naming schemes. One is Clayton had a KEP that is going to be released in 120, which proposes adding metrics for for pod level requests in the scheduler. And those follow the form kube pod resource requests, and then has that prefix. And then the metrics, the container metrics that are already in the endpoint have the form container CPU usage seconds total. So the question here is, if we add pod level metrics, should we follow the existing pattern for metrics on that endpoint? Or should we follow the pattern of the request metrics that Clayton is adding in the scheduler? And if we do choose to follow the request metrics, should we migrate the existing ones to also follow that pattern?
Did you have an initial like pros and cons enumerated that we could point to?
Let's see. I mean, Clayton and I have been going back and forth over the naming and what should be in it. I would say having cube as the prefix can be nice for consumers that may have other notions of pod that are not part of Kubernetes. So it's namespaced. I think, in my opinion, CPU and resource are redundant because CPU is a resource. I think the more important thing is probably just deciding whether we want the endpoint to be self-consistent or whether we want to be consistent with the request metrics. But I don't think Clayton is here to defend his position.
Yeah, let's try to follow up with him on Slack. I know I was talking about this a little bit, but I think we just need to get a group of us together.
Okay, I'll start a chat with Yumi and Clayton and we can talk through it.
If you can add me or just,
yep.
I just want to watch just so I can update the PR. My main thing is I just wanted to get this in. I was trying to be consistent, so as long as we can resolve this in the next day or so, that's my main concern. I'm using this downstream now, and I want to make sure that this gets in eventually.
Yeah, so Eric, I think I know Clayton is around today, so hopefully we can get all four of us on the same page. I know when I looked at your PR, I was thinking he's working in a similar spot, so I just want to make sure we get all aligned. Okay. Renal, do you want to talk about the challenges around CRI beta and what's going on with that?
Yeah, sure. So I first opened a PR to convert V1 Alpha 2 to V1 Beta 2 and quickly ran into the issue where the container D test started failing because container D is not in tree, and cryo would have the same problem. So what we need to do is we need to add a parallel V1 Beta 1 in addition to the V1 Alpha 2 proto, then get the get container D updated, cryo updated, bring them back into the CI, and then switch over the kubelet and the rest of the code to V1 Beta 1. So the PR I have in the doc right now is adding that proto. So we need to get that in. But now my worry is that what do we do for the runtime changes? Like Mike Brown was working on it, but he is out this week. So I was wondering if there's anyone on call from Container D that can follow up on the Container D changes to bring them back into the CI.
Just make sure I understand that, Renal. So like, we'll hit the same step when we would ultimately promote to GA. So what I'm wondering is, are we hitting like you'd need an entire new container D release cut as well, right? And so
right.
Are we trying to do too much within one release window? Is this basically us saying we need to get the interface plumbed and then try to actually get clients to update in the second one?
So yeah, we have that option. Like we can get the proto added, but then like we don't want to make the changes on the kubelet side to call into both the versions. So we can add the proto, maybe then update it in the next version. But is it okay? Like if you think about the changes we added to the beta, it's just incremental 2-3 changes to V1 Alpha 2. So is it okay if we get in this change and go beyond the code free state to update the runtimes, or are we okay waiting one more cycle to get the runtimes updated?
I think it's hard for us to justify treat this as the exceptional, right? Unless it is just we just think about it. It's just too hard to go through to release. So Manu, it is basically you just call out to someone to partner with you and to add this corresponding support and release on the container D.
Right.
Side?
Yeah. So yeah, after we merge this PR, we need that updated, and then we need to bring it back into CI. So the question is like, does it make sense to just merge this PR and then do the rest of it in the next release? Then I guess we are not really doing much, right? If you're not calling from kubelet into the new beta proto, we are not really using it.
Yeah, and it's painful, right? If we do the GA step too, because basically I'm also assuming, I mean, you're going to make these changes and then we need someone to vendor them, and people would only want to vendor them from stable releases. And I was trying to ask Bernal why we didn't hit this when we went V1 Alpha 1 to V1 Alpha 2. And I think you said it's because we didn't have these things in CI at the time.
Yeah, we didn't have containerd or cryo, which is not blocking yet in CI back then. So we didn't hit it. All the changes were in Docker shim. So Docker shim was updated along with the Alpha 2 changes.
And then I'm trying to think through other options we could do. Like, I don't really want to go in and build a massive like runtime manager shim to support speaking V1 beta 1 or V1 beta 2.
Yeah. On the runtime side, I think like containerd may prefer to support both, since they are not as strongly tied to the Kubernetes version as cryo is. But again, like that's the impression I got from talking to Mike, but he's not around this week. So, but on Kubernetes side, we should just stick to one version, I think.
Yeah, containerd by design, because we think about that there's the multiple versions. So basically, it's the plugin model. So like even like the CRI is kind of like the initial is plugin model for them.
Right. Yeah.
So by design, when we design, we talk to Michael Cosby, and we have think about the plugin model. Yeah. So I'm okay for you to merge, and then the rest of the container runtime follow up in the next release. So, but
okay. So I guess like we are just basically preparing for beta for next release, and we are not really moving. We cannot claim that since Kubernetes is not calling into it, which is fine by me, but just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think like how we can avoid this when we go from beta to GA. Like, are we unintentionally discovering something takes 6 months for every step where we were hoping 3? Because we'll hit the same thing, right?
Yeah.
How? Yeah. At minimum, we should merge the change. Whether or not we can figure out a way to accelerate it is, I think, orthogonal.
Okay.
And also, shouldn't like the CNI have the same problem, even worse problem, because we only have the 2 implementation so far. We start from 3, but 4. Then later now only have 2. So shouldn't like the CSI have much more vendor to support that? They shouldn't have the even worse problem than us. they are not really required all those vendor immediate support the newer version, right?
Yeah, so I think like some of this probably plays into how Containerd wants to manage the releases. So maybe next week when Mike is back or we have representation from them, we can have a deeper conversation. Meanwhile, we can merge this and I'll ping folks there to see if there's interest in vendoring this PR and making the changes if possible.
Okay. So please loop me in on this one.
Sure.
On this one, yeah, will affect our production. So that's why. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'll open an issue there, Don,
Sure.
and yeah,
Sure.
keep
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I believe by design shouldn't affect because that's how we initial design Containerd, and especially CRI Containerd because we try to treat that as the plugin and support multiple version, even different have to give the possibility even different API can plug in. So, but still, who knows? Things might change over times because everything's changing. So, yeah. So I want to make sure it's not hurt production. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to think through.
Go ahead.
Trying to think on the next step, right? Like, so we're hitting this at this phase of the release because it's near the end of a kube release and we're trying to land this. If we try to do the GA hop within a single release window, it would basically mean we would want to merge the GA equivalent much earlier in the release window and hope that there's enough time to get a Containerd, and obviously Cryo will update the version. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's the retro on this.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I didn't see like.
If we release in beta API, do we need to release new container managers that basically copy paste of existing one? So no like a runtime selection, but by feature flag, we can at least make Kubernetes users new beta 1 interfaces, so people can test it at least.
I feel probably that's not worth it. Maybe we can update the runtime and come back and do it all one shot. I don't know, like what Don and Derek feel about it.
Yeah, I just don't really want to create a
new. Unfortunately, my cost be. Yeah. Let's carry on this on your issue. So Manu, maybe and then we can discuss through the issue together with the Containerd community. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So Sergey, do you want to talk about the runtime class here?
Oh yeah, runtime class is just basically PR that was already looked at a couple times. So minor tweaks from the big original PR, but it generally was LGT a couple times already. So if you have time, take a look. And I wanted to ask whether we need to keep alpha API around. Technically, we can remove it right away. There is no support window like we need to keep API around for. So beta needs to be kept around for like 2 releases, I think, but alpha can be removed right away. So if you want to clean up code, I can send a separate PR right away and clean up this as well. Just curious if there are any objections with removing it.
This is alpha API, but I want to communicate because someone maybe have some dependency on this one in the production.
On Windows, we're doing a lot of, we're using runtime classes to pass extra annotations along.
Yeah.
And I think it would be helpful to have one release of an overlap for some of the work that we're doing with that.
Are you using beta or alpha? Because it was switched to beta for a couple of releases already.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Now we're going to GA. So there are 3 versions right now. I mean,
let me double
will be 3 versions.
I'm pretty sure we're using beta then. Let me double check real quick. In that case, then I don't have any objections.
Okay, once this PR is merged, hopefully this week I will start
Cool.
another one. It's not
And
I
critical.
just confirmed, yeah, everything we're doing is on the beta API versions, so for runtime class.
Thank you.
So it sounds like we are consensus on this one. Remove the V1 alpha one, and let's move to next topic, and the state weather metrics.
Yeah, that's me. So I know that Dashpool has had an issue open for a few years to reduce the metrics that are exposed by the kubelet. And now there's a KEP open to fully deprecate the C-advisor endpoints, which includes stats container, which is a source of detailed container resource utilization metrics. And I'm curious if there is an appetite to try to replace those metrics before we fully deprecate, or if we're just trying to get out of the business of like detailed metrics.
When we talk about the CRI, in the past, we actually, the CRI also have the monitoring metrics exposed. So you can see the both container D and CRI both expose even more detail of the containers metrics, so the resource metrics. So this is why that's kind of when we design long time ago, you have some huge debate at SIG Node, and so that's how we decided back then. Over time we didn't really deprecate. There's a couple reasons. One reason is the performance. Like even today, people still say they observe of the container D resource have some problem and performance and consent. So, but another reason is just priority. So I just share you some context. Yeah.
So I just want to make one comment as well. The KEP that's in flight is more of a consolidation than a removal of functionality. This should all still be available under the metrics C-advisor endpoint. We've found that the Prometheus metrics from C-advisor have been much more widely used than the container level metrics. So for now, that's probably the place I would go for detailed container metrics.
Can you repeat that? That was the...
Yeah, so I would treat this KEP not as a strict removal of information from the kubelet, but as a consolidation of the existing endpoints that we expose. The ones covered in that KEP are all C-advisor's JSON endpoints, which have not been as widely used as the Prometheus ones, and most of the community seems to have consolidated around using the Prometheus endpoints. If there's information that isn't available in the Prometheus endpoints that was available in the previous JSON endpoints, especially if you're relying on it, that would be useful to know. There is the possibility that we can add small amounts in order to make sure that people have migration paths. So that would be helpful information if you can add that to the KEP or comment on it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I wasn't aware that it was a consolidation. And what's the endpoint that you mentioned, the Prometheus?
Metrics/C-advisor.
Okay, perfect.
There's the option. So basically we still consolidate on the first one and the second one. What David mentioned there is just the JSON API.
If you do prefer a JSON API, one, I would be very interested to know why you prefer it. But two, there's also the kubelet summary API, which is also available at /stats/summary.
Yeah, the summary doesn't contain sufficient detail for our case, but I'll take a look at metrics C-advisor and report back on that. So
thanks.
So I also want to know what kind of the details you're looking for, and the summary API is missing. And that's so. I just want to say that we actually do want to initially when designing CRI, we do think about even like the first one, Prometheus metrics remove. We do concern about the backward compatibility, and also some customer rely on. We didn't expect people will have concern on the JSON API. So, but I also wondering what kind of the special metrics you are looking for. Network I/O. So I know the thing.
Yeah, we need a CPU, memory, file system, and network. 3 of those aren't too hard to get, but network particularly has been tricky to get through other sources. So
yes, because the first 2 we basically covered. In some other format, only network one we didn't cover. That's true. Okay, got it. Thanks for sharing your feedback here.
Did you also have a question about the timeline that we can answer?
I think I was curious if, yeah, I guess my question has changed with that additional context that you're not trying to remove metrics, because my initial impression from the issue that you've had open for a few years is that that Kubernetes is trying to move utilization metrics out of the sort of in-tree core support.
Mm-hmm. I'll say that is, I think, or at least that was my goal when I was working on that. I'm not actively working on that right now. Perhaps someone else will pick that work up. But this KEP in particular is not aimed at removing content. It's just aimed at reducing the number of endpoints and the number of different formats we support.
Okay, I would point out that I think that clarity that these metrics are available elsewhere isn't totally clear to everyone on that issue. So maybe a little more sort of clear discussion would be helpful to the community.
Okay.
Thanks. So next goes to the next one. I think last one we have, it is Karen. Karen, do you want to quickly call out? I guess you just want to call attention, but to quickly update the NPD.
Yeah, I think yeah, I just wanted to call out, this is related to the first thing we started with, so nice wrap there. But yeah, all NPD development is blocked because of a failing end-to-end test for like 3 weeks now, or 2 weeks now. So we have fixes, but unfortunately, the approvers of NPD are not approvers of the end-to-end tests. And so there's a little bit of latency there. But if there's a process for getting approval other than just assigning people and hitting them up on Slack, we can go through that. But yeah, basically after these 2 PRs, the test will be green and we can resume development on the NPD repo.
Is there any reason we can't, like to your point on the approval boundaries and stuff, like, don't these tests better belong in NPD rather than in core KK? Right, like we kind of have this optional add-on being tested in the core repo, and it feels like it could just test it in the optional add-on repo.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. I just started looking at NPD last week, and this particular test is a pre-submit on the NPD repo and not the main Kubernetes repo. So it doesn't quite make sense, but maybe Don, you have some background for that. Maybe someone else has more background on that.
I don't have the background on this one, why this is in here, because like I said, we do have the state weather special test. We also have the integration part of the test because it's already part of the Kubernetes. So, and then we also have the node test especially for state weather. NPDY is but this one node problem detector, actually it is node level test. It's just by happen. If you look at that's the E2E node. And so basically it is inside of the node interest of the test. And I guess just over time, people just kind of like because today's today's Kubernetes, a lot of tests generated by node team, actually, SIG Node team or GK node team. So they're using a lot of node team expanded become to Kubernetes conform test. So maybe during that time, they expanded even like the extended node problem detector also is part of cluster level of the end-to-end test. That's all. So I don't have the detail why it's become like the cluster level of end-to-end test. But I think about the people if want to using NPD in the production, they do expect the community, just like they expect the community have some of the runtime, right? Container runtime test. So then they can at least share the test result so they can use in that out of box. That's all.
Yeah, it's just for this particular test, it's a EDE node test. It's not like cluster-wide testing. And
yeah.
I think the history is just convenience that it was done here. And seems like it's biting us, but I'm happy to approve this. We can approve it. It just seems like the test better fit with the add-on, right? Like, would we want node feature discovery tests to get integrated into this suite? Probably not, right? So if we can fix the MPD pre-submits to not depend on this test in Cube, that seems like a good piece of debt we could clean up.
That's a good point, and I've written it down. I'll open a bug to at least track this and see if we can pull out the test to the other repo. Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's all for today. Oh, David, you just David, do you want to talk?
Yeah, I just added something quickly. I just wanted to do a quick shout out since we didn't have SIG Node last week. I sent out a PR for the graceful shutdown cap, the implementation there. Sergey and Ronald took a quick look at it, so I'd appreciate if anyone else had review comments to take a quick look. I'm trying to get it in for 120, but still has some API review and a couple things. So if anyone has any feedback, would appreciate it.
Okay.
Just want to do a quick shout out.
I will take a look on your proposal here. Yeah. Thanks. I think that's all from today. Any other topic people want to call out to get attention, or want to some concern, or they want to call out and people can think in and next week can come back to discuss?
Actually, Don, if we have a couple minutes here, try to talk a little bit with Sasha and Mernal in the background on the core Slack on the CRI issue. Like, if we could maybe close on that, like, I kind of feel like the package version is irrelevant and we should bump to a V1 package version and still treat it, just avoid this double hop. I don't know if we have 5 minutes, maybe close on this now, because it seems like a good use of time for our goal. Is Sasha on the call, or?
Yeah.
Sasha may not be on the call. It's late for him. But,
so basically the idea here would be we change your terminal to go from set of V1 to V1. The proto would be there that in 121 runtimes can start supporting it. And then we could then, the package version saying it's V1 is in name only, in the same way that V1 Alpha 1 is basically in name only today with CRI. But then we could avoid the double hop, is basically what I'm thinking here. Sergey, I see you on the Slack. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand logistics of it. So containerd will, like, there is a like CRI package for containerd, and it will ship support for V1, and then this would be untested, but then we will pick it up somehow in Kubernetes tree for the tests.
Right. I'm thinking that we could merge the proto now And then in 121 development cycle, both Containerd and Cryo communities could ensure that their server side of that version is supported. And we would then bump in 121 kubelet to only speak that version. But we could avoid 6 months of intermediate or kubelet having bilingual of CRI versions.
Yeah, I'm also curious how this PR will look like in Kubernetes repository to switch to V1. So we need to pick up new Containerd version and switch to V1 simultaneously, right?
Actually, it doesn't have to be that way, right? I mean, so Containerd can continue supporting both V1 Alpha 1 and V1 at the same time, depending on how they want to support different Kubernetes versions with the same version of Containerd or not. On Cryo side, we'll mostly just end up switching over to V1 after a brief transition period. So
yeah, basically the kubelet would speak one client version, but the runtimes could be bilingual. But I think trying to make the kubelet bilingual is tough, and the package version here just seems semantics at best, and felt like we could have saved 6 months of overhead if we were good with that.
Yeah.
So that's why I personally think about by design, Containerd it is designed like this way. I think I mentioned, but I cannot call out because Mac Brown is not here. Mac Cosby also is not here. I just mentioned that over time. So the Containerd implementation maybe is not as flexible as what we design. Treat those API as the plugin. So because initially we designed like a Containerd have their internal API and the CRI is the external API to talk about the Kubernetes, then they could plug in some different version or plug in different of the API. So that's kind of the original we designed, just like we also have the container share design, right? So like the plugin too. So that's why I support different use cases. But over time, since after the original first year design, I kind of detached, so I don't know current the production development it is. So I'm glad Sergey called out. Otherwise, I will poke you, Sergey. So Sergey actually is looking into those CI and Containerd integration right now. So so we need to make decision as soon as possible. But by design, if we could do Containerd can do that one, I don't have any question. I don't have any concern. But shouldn't the Cryo have the similar problem?
Yeah, both of them should have a similar problem, but Cryo is not blocking CI right now. That's why we're not hitting it. Yeah, Harshal is working on making that happen. So yeah.
I asked Brian Goff to join. He is pretty familiar with Containerd, and it looks like he got on the call.
Oh.
Yeah, so it is the same plugin model. I'm not all that familiar with what would be involved with changing that out, or it should be trivial to add a second plugin for supporting V1. I can't think.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of. I think it would just have to be. You have to have one or the other involved because of listening ports and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it should be not difficult.
Totally. Yeah. I even remember there's some optimization made by Michael Cosby, even support multiple plugin, and the resource overhead is minimal, and performance actually also is very, very minimal. So I remember that's a long time ago when we added this requirement. So have the huge debate. So, but okay, thank you, Brian.
I think the macro question, Dawn, is like, do we expect on a going forward basis that the kubelet speaks one version of CRI or speaks many versions of CRI? And I feel like the kubelet speaking one language was like the design goal of CRI to begin with. So if we could skip to V1, then in the package version, we can we can externally message it as still beta once that step in 121 is done, but I think it saves a lot of grief. So if I'm not hearing objection on that, then so Renal, if you can make an update, then
yeah, I'll get in that Windows PR and then I'll update the event.
Sure. Sergey, if you have more concern, can you raise that one? I believe, but by design, that's definitely, but I understand they may have some like the extra work. So hopefully you can follow up through the PR, through the CAP. But I think about by design, that should be straightforward. Yeah, because we did that a while back.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay, sounds like at least we are largely consensus on this topic. We can save some time and we can try to converging on the move to the destination package sooner. And unless there are some real production issue come out from the Containerd community.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. That's all for today. And see you through this week. I will stay on the Slack more often and see you on there. If you need me and Derek and talk to us through the Slack. Thanks.
Yep. Thanks all.
Thank you, folks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.